Hello, I'm Felicia Jackson.
And I am Giulia Bottaro.
Welcome to Shake and Not Burn. Every day we're bombarded with headlines of crisis and disruption, from climate shocks to inequality to AI upheaval.
But behind the noise are choices, patterns, and opportunities. What we need is sustainability literacy, the clarity and confidence to interpret complexity, see trade-offs, and make decisions.
Our podcast goes beyond the headlines to uncover how real people are tackling change and what we can learn from them.
You can use these ideas to stay steady, even unshakable, in a world that feels uncertain.
This is Shaken Not Burned.
Welcome to a new episode of Shaken Not Burned. I'm your host, Giulia Bottaro. The rich are getting richer. Even though many countries promise a welfare system, healthy job markets, and in general a decent quality of life for the masses, the numbers suggest that inequality is only getting worse. According to Oxfam, in 2025, billionaire wealth jumped by over 16% to $18.3 trillion compared to 2024 levels. This massive amount of money is spread between only 3,000 people. That's an average of $6.1 billion each. What's even more shocking is that billionaire wealth has gone up by 81% in just 5 years. Meanwhile, 25% of the global population can't afford regular meals, and nearly half are living in poverty. Okay, but this is a sustainability podcast, one may argue. How is this relevant? One of the central tenets of Shaken Not Burned is pursuing a just transition. If the world's richest 1% own around 45% of the global wealth, we can't expect this money to be invested in a way that will benefit all people in an equitable manner. So what can we do to recalibrate the world's wealth system? I explored this urgent question with Julia Davis, an impact investor at We Have the Power and a member of Patriotic Millionaires UK. Hello, Julia. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Can you tell me about your professional experience and what led you to Patriotic Millionaires?
I was a lawyer by profession, a commercial lawyer. I worked on contracts, sort of company acquisitions, that kind of thing to start off with. But I've always understood that as people, we were living our lives in a way that wasn't working for other life on Earth, and indeed wasn't really working for us. So we sort of catchphrase that as thinking about the environment. But what we're really talking about is living conditions for us as people and for everything else that lives on Earth. So I've always been aware of that. Been a vegetarian since I was a teenager, been a member of Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth since I was a teenager. But I was a lawyer, and quite soon after I'd sort of gained experience as a lawyer, I started working with charities, and that was my real interest. And I also helped set up a company called Osprey Europe, and Osprey Europe was the European distributor of Osprey backpacks and travel bags, which some of your listeners might be very familiar with. It's through my involvement in Osprey Europe that I was then able to, later on, when we sold our stake in the company, that gave me money, which was enabled me to kind of up my stakes in terms of taking action to address these problems, which I've been very well aware of for a very long time. So I went from being somebody that had, a standing order in our monthly donation of a few pounds to all the charities that I supported, to someone that was able to use that money, which I had then come into through helping to set that company up, to really address some of these problems that we face as society. And that tells you what we're talking about here, because I always think of money as being the keys to the cupboard to unlock all of that sort of emergency equipment that we need to address all these problems that we are facing in the world, as people and as guardians of the world which everything else on Earth lives in. We've got to a position now as a species which we are in complete control as to whether everything on Earth lives or doesn't live. And that gives us enormous responsibility. But the level of responsibility that we have and a level with which we as individuals can take action on that is governed by a number of factors. It's governed by the extent to which we have the time and the resources and the ability to really act on that. Because most people, of course, are just coping. right now, as I was for a while. There's periods of life where you've got your head down, you're just cracking on with work, you're raising your family, and you really don't have time for much else. And there are many people that are doing that, and despite the fact that they're working very hard, they're struggling even to keep up with their family's needs. They're struggling to pay the bills. They're struggling to put food on the table. They're struggling to get that new pair of shoes that their children need. So that tells you how much money is at the core of basically everything. It's at the core of whether we thrive or don't thrive, both as people and as members of the fantastic diversity of life on Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why some people are arguing, for example, to put a price on nature, which is a whole discussion for another time, maybe. But that shows that when it's sustainability, money talks. And sometimes people say we live in a capitalistic world and this is the only system that we've got and this is how we have to operate. So you're part of the movement Patriotic Millionaires UK. I understand that there is a global movement as well. What are you all advocating for?
So we're a group of millionaires who really understand the responsibility and the choices that you have when you have more money than you need to just cope with your everyday needs and those of your family, significantly more money than that. Within the UK, there's 85 members now, and we understand that at the root of the problems that we are facing right across the world, but within each of our individual countries, really come down to the fact that we are now in a society where we have wealth extremism. So we talk a lot about extremism and the threats of extremism. Actually, when you look into it, the greatest threat that is facing life on Earth is wealth extremism, because we have a society now where wealth is snowballing into the hands of fewer and fewer people. And so we have the vast majority of people just scrabbling around, working hard, trying to just keep up with their everyday needs, trying to keep their families afloat. And then we have other people who, through their wealth, are kind of almost acting like a Hoover. They're hoovering up more wealth through their wealth. And this system has become out of hand. It's become extreme. And that is now affecting just everyone. It doesn't really matter what you're interested in, what your focus is, whether you're a small or medium-sized business trying to stay afloat, whether you are working in public service, where you're running your own business, unless you are one of these extremely, extremely wealthy people, the system's not really working for you right now. And that even includes people who have some level of wealth themselves, because we're none of us in isolation. We all have people that we care about and that we love. And we have to think about their futures also. I always believe that wealth gives you choice, and it gives you choice to live a fantastic life. You really can. You don't have some of the troubles that many people have. You have wonderful things to worry about and think about, like where you're going to go on holiday, what you're going to spend your time with, because you have that choice, which a lot of people don't have. And I think that if you have that level of choice and you then choose to make all of your choices in such a way that it is making life on Earth precarious for others, not just a few others, but the vast majority of others, what sort of person are you? So at Patriotic Millionaires, we believe that with wealth comes a level of responsibility. And we want to get across some really simple messages, which are really come to the heart, I think, of just living in a decent society. That if you have significant wealth, you have the ability to contribute to a functioning society. And you can do that without it impacting your standard of life, the standard of life of your kids, of those around you that you care about. And if you choose not to do that, well, why? Let's really dig into why are you choosing not to do that? And so often we don't ask those questions. We just kind of accept it. And I guess as someone myself and there's many others, people in our group that come from all manner of backgrounds. Some of them, have inherited wealth, family wealth. Some of them, like myself, they've come into wealth through businesses that they've set up. Lots of different people, different ages, different backgrounds, different experiences. But I think we all understand the great privilege that wealth gives us, and the ability that it gives us to just be decent members of society and be willing to say we can contribute to a functioning society and still have a fantastic life. And why on earth would we not do so? So as a group, we advocate for fairer taxation of wealth because we're in a situation now where we've enabled or allowed this extreme wealth concentration to happen. Only way of addressing that is more fairly taxing wealth. Now, we hear all of the time all the arguments against that. But let's just look at the fundamentals. Let's look at why. Why would someone with this incredible privilege and this ability to contribute to a functioning society, what's at the heart of them not being willing to do that? So we've got 10 policies. Probably the ones you hear most about is that we advocate for a very moderate wealth tax. So our starting proposal is, because of course it's not for us to set exactly how these things are set out.
Yeah.
We just give some suggestions. We want people to focus on, we've got to look at taxing wealth for a number of reasons. And there's a few others which I think we should talk about. Our wealth proposal is a very moderate tax of 2% on wealth above £10 million.
What is
So
it
if you've
now?
got, there is no
how-
wealth tax in the UK.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's
So
not
you
in
can
the UK.
have £10 million and you just keep them.
On your wealth,
Like
obviously,
you
you pay
don't.
other taxes. There's a
Okay. Yeah.
range
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
taxes. So
Of
in every
course.
country,
Yeah.
obviously, there are a range of taxes. So
Mhm.
at the moment, there's an over focus on taxing income that people get from going out to work. And in the UK, we've allowed a situation to have where we seem to be increasing taxation of work and being extremely reluctant to even look at increasing taxation of wealth. So that comes back to another significant problem with extreme concentration of wealth, is that it is eroding our democracies. And we see, the clearest example of that just happened in Davos, where we had the most powerful man in the world stand up, disrespect every other leader in the world, pronounce one falsehood after another, and nobody challenged him in that room. They all sat and they, laughed at his non-jokes, etc. That is the clearest example of the way in which extreme wealth is eroding our democracy and making life on earth extremely perilous, I would say. And that's problematic. So,
Yeah.
there's a range of taxes in the UK. We do have taxes on capital gains, which is income that people make from their wealth. But for some bizarre reason, we tax income which people get from wealth at a lower rate than we tax income which people get from going out to work. Now, of course, there's only so many hours in the week that you can work. Well, if you've got wealth, that wealth can be up to, there's no end to it, and that can be outgoing, that could be making money for you, and it does make money for you because wealth makes money for you.
Can I just ask, just to get my head around it, and hopefully will help listeners as well. So, for example, say that maybe in your case, you sold a stake in a company, you
Yeah.
receive, let's say, 10 million. Does it mean that 10 million is not taxed?
No.
Like,
No.
what is
Because
taxed of this stake?
yes. So when you sell a company, you make a capital gain. If you sell shares or if you sell anything like that, that's an asset that is taxed, then you pay tax on the gain that you've made. In simple terms, the difference between what you spent on it and what you get when you sell it. But the point is that not everybody gets their wealth in that way. There are those that inherit wealth. And yes, of course, we have an inheritance tax, but there's lots of other things that where people build up wealth over a long period of time. And then when you've got that wealth, you're not contributing from that wealth, and that wealth is making more wealth. So
Yeah,
we're
okay.
proposing an additional tax, and which would be a new tax in the UK, which we tax, but really moderate, 2% on wealth above 10 million. And the reason why we think that's incredibly important, that needs to happen, is because we've allowed this extreme concentration of wealth into the hands of smaller and smaller number of people. And the other reason why, I believe that we don't talk about enough is that at the moment we are focusing to pay all of our public services, to look after our elderly, to fund our education system, to fund health, repair roads, our defence system, all of that. We focus far too much on taxing income from going out to work. And there are two factors which mean that is just not a viable solution going forward in countries like the UK. One is that we have an increasingly aging population. And that's a great thing, because that means that we have improved health to such an extent that people can live longer. But that does mean that we're going to have increasing number of elderly people who need to be looked after by a smaller proportionate number of working people. Then you add into that AI. So we absolutely know that AI is going to mean that a lot of jobs just don't exist anymore. We're being told this. It's admitted that's the case. We have companies now where they're effectively employing people just as the interim stage until they could be replaced by some form of, I would say, every job in an Amazon warehouse is there until they can be replaced by robots. Why we have regions that go after, having an Amazon warehouse in their area, thinking that's going to be a job provider, that just seems to be so short-sighted. Those jobs aren't going to be there for very long. There's a reason why the people working in those places are treated a bit like robots, because they're only there until they're replaced by robots.
Yeah.
Forget fairness. Forget the fact that this is just, I would say, a very abnormal way of running your societies, that you would allow this extreme concentration of wealth into the hands of a few people. Aging population plus AI means that we have got to move the focus of taxation from income from work to wealth. I think that's the only way for us to maintain standards of living in countries like the UK. And personally, I think it's quite shameful that we've been allowing those standards to slip, and we've allowed things which you would expect our public sector to fund as being things that actually, no, they're just luxuries now, and we don't expect them to be funded. And examples of that are just sort of leisure facilities, public swimming pools. More and more of those, they've just been having to either reduce their hours or shut down because they haven't had the funding anymore. And so that
Activities for
means that
kids.
kids, elderly people, so they can stay active, everyone. So it doesn't make sense, even from a, financial management system, to allow these things to happen, because if people have less access to leisure facilities where they can exercise, they're going to not be as healthy. They're going to need more healthcare, which you've got to pay for. So these things don't make sense at all. But it all comes back to the fact that we have allowed a system to happen where wealth has been consolidated into the hands of fewer and fewer people, and that money has then not been used to invest in welfare for everyone, welfare for the entire society.
I would like to point out as well that I quoted an Oxfam study in the intro mentioning the world, but it's the same for the UK. Billionaire wealth has gone up, maybe in every country, I don't know, but definitely UK has gone up as well. So we can't even say, oh, maybe it's somewhere else. No, it is in the UK. And as you said, it's a system that works that way. Before we delve into more of this conversation, because there is so much I want to explore, I wanted to ask you the difference between a millionaire and billionaire, because for like the average person, both mean very rich. And my brain doesn't compute very well what it means in terms of how much money you have. And also because the fact that 3,000 billionaires in the world have $6.1 billion each is crazy. But how crazy is it? What does it mean practically?
I'm always thinking about it, because you're right. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Millionaire, billionaire sounds like the same thing. Let's just think about it in terms of the difference between 1 year and a millennium. So a millennium's 1,000 years. Okay. So if you have £1 million, you have £1 million. If you have £1 billion, you have 1,000 million pounds. Okay. So imagine for most people, the idea of spending £1 million a year sounds crazy, doesn't it? It's like, wow, how could you even do that? Right. Well, it would take a billionaire 1,000 years to spend £1 billion, spending £1 million a year. And let's remember that in the meantime, they're making multi-million pounds a year, because of course, money makes money. So I was just thinking about, you go back 1,000 years, that takes you back to 1026.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. And that just shows you how crazy it is. And then if you look at that, we have some people who have, for example, $300 billion. I can't remember what the precise figure some of these top tech guys is, but it's in that region. So you're talking about 300 millenniums, so 300,000 years compared to 1 year.
Yeah.
So this is how utter bonkers it is. And that is why this idea that it's good for us to leave these people with that amount of wealth while they're busily, pursuing their business models, which, let's face it, are not based on creating good quality jobs for people. In fact, if anything, a number of them, I'll talk again about Amazon, are based on wiping out good quality jobs in local small to medium sized businesses. Um, but we're told that's what's good for us. That's good for society. Well, that means that you have people who have more power than countries. They certainly have more wealth than countries. Because during this period of time when we've allowed this extreme concentration of wealth into the hands of a few private individuals, um, public wealth in countries like the UK, and unfortunately that's all I can talk to in terms of these figures, has crashed. So last time I looked at it, over a period of about 35 years, the value of the UK's public assets went from, I don't know, several hundred billion to minus a trillion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where is
Yes.
this? Where is it gone?
Well, you've got these guys who've got
Yeah.
loads and loads of money, and you've got now this public purse that's not just empty but massively in the red. And during
Wow.
that period of time, this is going beyond what we were going to talk about, but there's lots of reasons for that, which you can read about. There was a great book called Vulture Capitalism, and then there's books about how we've got where we are, and a lot of it has been about privatization of utilities. So one of the particularly unpleasant topics in the UK is that we privatised our water companies in the UK. We're about the only country that's done that. And that means that we now have rivers that are running with sewage. We have beaches where, lovely beaches, you're ill-advised to go in the water on certain days because there's been sewage just discharged into the sea. And during that time, we've had these privatized water companies where vast sums have been paid out to the owners of those companies whilst they've not invested in updating our water infrastructure. And that's just
because
one
a lot of
example.
water is lost actually through the pipes.
Oh, yeah,
A crazy
absolutely.
amount. So people
Yeah,
pay and then pay for what? For water that's gone in the street. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Can you be an ethical can you become a billionaire ethically in your view?
I don't know, but I think remaining a billionaire isn't ethical.
Okay.
Because I guess in these days of incredible tech, I don't know, maybe you could, because let's remember sometimes the value of these people's assets can be the companies they've built up. I don't want to say
Okay.
that it's impossible to become an ethical billionaire. I would say remaining a billionaire is not ethical, because why do you need that level of money when there's all of these problems that you could sort out? How can you have a company, I'm sorry, I'm going to come back to it again, called Amazon when we are destroying the Amazon rainforest and you have so much money that you basically take over Venice for your wedding.
I was
But
going to
you
bring
will
that
not
up.
protect this rainforest of which
Yeah.
you've taken the name for your business, and you don't protect that rainforest, which is basically so fundamental to the rest of the world, because it is this sort of like this home to such a vast amount of all biodiversity. It's so fundamental in maintaining our climate.
The lung of the planet. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would say if you've got that level of money and you're not using it to address all of these problems, what's wrong with you? I don't get it.
I recently was speaking to somebody about this topic and they said, oh, well, some people are rich. What's the problem? How do you normally respond to this statement? So I can use it again next time
Yeah,
I
I mean,
hear this.
yes, some people are rich, but yes, some people have the ability to make life on Earth less unsafe. And if you have the ability to make life on Earth less unsafe and you don't do it again, what's wrong with you? If you have that level of money, because there's just no doubt we know that there are just these sort of layer on top of layer of problems that we are addressing: climate crisis, crashing of biodiversity, pollution of our oceans, um, you know, basically lots and lots of people that are facing the choice of whether or not they feed their families or they heat their homes. We have people who are now living in parts of the world which are becoming uninhabitable. Um, and all of that, basically, we know what we need to do to address all of those problems. It requires money to address all of those problems. How can you have the ability to address those problems and choose not only not to do so, but to actually make those problems worse. So you mentioned one Oxfam stat. Another one is that billionaires, they emit more carbon in 90 minutes than the average person does in a lifetime. So these are people, they're not only choosing to not, because I kind of I see lots of money. If you've got lots of money, I see it kind of like firefighting equipment. Like imagine that you're in a street and there's houses on fire and you're the person that has all the firefighting equipment and you choose not to use that firefighting equipment to put
You
those
just
houses
keep
out.
it there and look at it. You're not even doing anything with the firefighting
Do you know what?
equipment.
You're doing worse than that. You're throwing petrol on the fire.
Right, yes.
So you've got the firefighting equipment. You could put those houses out, but you choose not to. Instead, you choose to throw some petrol on the fire because it's amusing. It basically, you enjoy doing so. So these are people that are choosing to use their ability to, get the firefighting equipment out there instead to make the fire worse. And again, I will say, what's wrong with these people? That's what we've got to ask, because I'm very, very interested in wildlife and nature, and now I've got the great choice because I'm very wealthy to spend my time reading about nature and that kind of thing rather than head down working on contracts. We're very quick to talk about abnormal behavior in animals, about when animals just basically go in and they'll attack something and all this kind of thing. We're quick to talk about that. And what about when humans are basically choosing to make life on Earth incredibly unsafe for most other people and most other life? And we just let that happen. So that's what I think we need to start questioning. And this is all quite negative. The wonderful, wonderful thing about having money is you get to live a fantastic life and you get to help fantastic projects. One of the things people often say to us as patriotic millionaires is because we advocate to tax for higher taxes, they say to us, why don't you just use your money to sort these problems out? Well, most of us do. Most of us are involved in projects. And I get involved in projects to help restore nature. And I'm very passionate about helping to restore land to nature and people so people get access and also we allow nature to recover. And I also I'm very passionate about trying to get things that we need to live and thrive into the hands of communities. So myself and a few others in our group, we work on supporting community energy companies. And these are not-for-profit companies, which basically they will install renewable energy on maybe schools, hospitals, social housing, and then they basically provide cheaper energy for the schools, etc., the buildings where the renewables are installed, and also the profits from those installations go back into the community. So instead of having this extremely extractive model of oil and gas companies, where we have vast amounts of money being made by basically an industry that's making life on Earth very unsafe, and the money is all going back into the hands of people who already have vast amounts of money. These community energy companies, basically, they are in multiple ways, they are beneficial. And they are also helping to diversify our energy dependence. I think one of the things that we need to consider going forward is having a more diversified structure so that we just aren't relying on a few vast companies for the things that we need. We need a bit of resilience in that. So that's why I am very passionate about community energy. It's a joy to do that because you get to support wonderful people. Having money and doing the right thing for it. It's not a dowdy grey thing. It doesn't mean that you're not enjoying your wealth. You absolutely are, but you're enjoying it with a clear conscience.
I think it's great that you're actually advocating to the government for systemic change, because it's great that as an individual you donate money or fund good projects, but it's all very individualistic. And as you mentioned earlier, the problem is we are in a system that allows this. So we should just address the problem at the root rather than having billionaires who set up charities. And then I'm sorry, but I'm very skeptical sometimes because I'm aware that you can sort of evade tax or just avoid paying tax by setting certain charitable enterprises. I'm not saying that is all of philanthropy, but that happens. And to mention once more the Bezos Earth Fund, it's also kind of an oxymoron considering what Amazon does. So again, it's like you're creating a problem that is super massive and then you're trying to address a little tiny portion. All of this to say we need systemic solutions which is not having billionaires in the first place. And yeah, you start with policy. Are there any other ways beyond taxing wealth that you think could work in redistributing the money?
There's lots of other things, but let's just focus on, you're absolutely right. We have got to tax wealth, because philanthropy is basically how very wealthy people get away with it, quite frankly. It's a bit like, look at this little bit of good that we're doing. Don't look at actually all of this stuff that we're doing, the fact that we have all this wealthy money. Really, it's not that philanthropy isn't good. It's just nowhere near enough. And it's also not democratic. Don't forget, the people sort of donating, they can choose what it is that they happen to want to support, and that, you said, they can just delay. Um, so Jeff Bezos, he said he was going to give away more than half of his wealth in his lifetime. What does that mean? In his lifetime, that could mean that when in 20 years' time he decides to start giving away some money. In the meantime, he's more than, I don't know, quadrupled his wealth or whatever. And like you said, in the meantime, his very business model is making life on Earth much less safe. So philanthropy isn't enough. Yes, there's other things we can do, but at the heart of it, we have got to tax wealth, because until we start doing that, this problem is going to get worse. And the longer we delay doing it, the more difficult it's going to be, because the more of a stranglehold these people will have over power in the world. We already have them controlling our politics. We already have them taking control of the most powerful country in the world, and through that, basically promoting things which are patently untrue, and operating the most powerful country on earth in a way that's absolutely against the interests of its very citizens. That's what is happening all of the while, that we do not address this. Yes, there's lots of other things that we can do. So the start, anyone that's listening to this that's still buying from Amazon, why are you doing it? So yes, of course, we can take control in our own, because I think it's very important. We have to address these things systemically, but we also have to take some personal responsibility for what we do. So all of these things really, really matter. But at the heart of it, yes, we've got to tax wealth, and we've got to stop listening to these narratives which will tell us that it's good for us, it's good for everyone, to allow this vast amount of wealth to rest in the hands of a very small number of people who are running their businesses in a way that is making life on Earth less safe for everyone.
Trickle-down economics does not work. How is the government responding to your request to tax wealth?
It's not responding, it's ignoring it, and actually it's going in the wrong direction. So it is incredibly disappointing. So in the UK, we've had a number of things that have been incredibly disappointing. So which is increased taxation on the lowest paid. Tax on income kicks in above a threshold. So there's a threshold below which people don't pay tax. And the government in the UK has been freezing that threshold for number of years, and they've just increased the length of time when it will be frozen, which means that more and more low paid people are having to pay tax. They've also, instead of increasing taxation of wealth, they chose to increase taxation of work. So they put up employers' national insurance, which is basically a levy which employers pay on wages for many businesses, many charities, many organizations doing great stuff. It makes it more costly for them to employ people. So there seems to be this total lack of support, I would say, for work. Lots of rhetoric saying they support work, at the same time as actions which don't support work. Amazon recently, they were trialing deliveries by drones in the UK. At the moment, you see a lot of people delivering parcels around the place. Well, Amazon have a plan that those people won't be doing that quite soon. In the meantime, we have small to medium-sized businesses that are really, really struggling because it's becoming more expensive for them to employ people. We have lots and lots of people who are in work, working as many hours as they have, and they still can't afford to look after their families. So no, we don't have a government that's listening, which again goes to one of the real problems of wealth concentration, is that the people that get access to our governments, get to be before them, get to speak to them, get to put their story, their views forward, are the wealthiest in society. I do believe that there's also this kind of almost ideological idea that large businesses are more productive they're more efficient. But I think it's really important to look at society as a whole and about resilience. If we want resilience, if we want basically people to be able to control things for themselves, we need to support those smaller and medium-sized businesses and people who are self-employed. They're not being supported at the moment. There's far too much that is, framed in society just to support these very, very large businesses. Because of course, when we talk about these issues, it's not just about not taxing individual wealth fairly. It's also the fact that we allow a lot of companies to still structure their businesses in such a way that they're not paying fair tax. In the way that smaller businesses, they don't really have any choice.
And if all these businesses, well, if many of these large companies will replace people with AI or robots, then all these people who are jobless won't even be able to create their own business or go freelance if the system doesn't work in that way. How can they provide for themselves? Is there a benefit to have a company owned or led by a billionaire? Could they pour money into it if it fails, or?
Of course they could. I mean, there's so many fantastic innovations out there that could make life on Earth better for everyone. So I'm very interested in the circular economy, replacing single use, which I think it's a bad mindset. We could be investing in circular economy, in reuse businesses, and that requires money. That requires money and support to get those systems set up. I've tried to invest in lots of companies, and they've been bought down by a system which still basically gives unfair advantages to companies that are polluting. Because we don't put the proper cost on companies for the pollution that they create in terms of the waste that they create, then it means if you have companies that are trying to do the right thing, so they're trying to push forward with reuse solutions, not only are they incurring higher costs, but it's really difficult for them to compete with these companies which are providing sort of, very relatively cheap solutions, which are all based on single use because they're not bearing the cost of the consequences of what they're doing. These people, that's what I'm talking about in terms of these people have the keys to the cupboard with all of the emergency equipment in it. So they could be investing in all of these solutions, which could transform society. So we have these issues. We've got significant health problems in the UK and other countries where we have obesity crisis. We have people who are struggling because they're not getting enough exercise. They're spending too much time on screens, all those kind of things. So we could be using our money to make it easier for people to get out more and use active transport, public transport, have better access to healthy food. All of these things we could do, and they would address these problems, plus also address problems for people, make people happier. We could be creating fantastic spaces for people to get together and address loneliness. That money could do such incredible good. And that's why it's so wrong when it's used actually to fund such incredible bad.
Is there anything that the average person or average business, because our podcast is aimed at professionals, can do, to help you spread the word? Or in practical terms, you did mention a few things earlier. Any tips there for the listeners?
Yeah, so they can support the work of organisations like Tax Justice UK, and there are international arms to that. There's the Fair Tax Foundation, which supports and pushes the companies who do pay fair tax. You can support what we're doing and write to your MP and let it be known that you support fairer taxation of wealth. And if you are a small to medium-sized business, then you can stop allowing these big businesses to basically what I call business wash. So you know about greenwash, don't you? Where basically companies will kind of make these fake sort of claims. Well, you have these big businesses that suggest that certain things are good for business, but what they mean is good for their business, not good for small to medium-sized businesses. So we need to make this distinction that what is good for these massive corporations is not good for small to medium-sized businesses. The businesses which are really involved in their local communities, the businesses that are providing quality jobs that really care about their employees, and are a sort of well-loved part of the community, which are being rubbed out. We've seen what happened to our high streets in the UK. We're not going to go back to a time when, we're going to have big department stores and we're going to have all of these shops and that kind of thing. We need to move forward with our high streets. But I hope that we move forward in such a way that there is lots of space for small to medium-sized independent businesses. And we don't just have all of them just replaced by chains, impersonal chains. So every place looks the same. And we don't have that wonderful individuality, and we don't have the opportunity for these people to start their businesses and show what they're capable of, and let's support. We talk about diversity has been turned into this sort of demon word in certain places, but diversity for me means the wonderful diversity of life on Earth. So all of the fantastic sort of animals out there, but also diversity of businesses and business models. And what I do not want to see is it all being the same, because where's the joy in that?
Boring.
So yes, at very least it's boring. So
it's boring, and it
doesn't.
It only creates employees.
It doesn't nurture that innovation. So if you're a small to medium-sized business, don't let these guys suggest that what's good for them is good for you, because it's not.
Thank you so much, Julia, for the very inspiring chat. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that is important for this conversation?
It's been really lovely chatting to you. And what I would say is, if there's anybody out there that is coming up to being in the fantastic and very fortunate position that I was in when I sold out of Osprey Europe, and you're wondering what to do, there's lots of resources and things out there. And lots of people that are happy to sort of share that experience, because when I was in that situation and I was trying to work out how I then use my wealth to do good, it wasn't that simple. And there's a lot of sort of, I think, wrong routes that you can take. And there's a very traditional model where people would set up charities and create an endowment where they would lock up their money for long periods of time and then just trickle out little bits of income that they make on that money, which isn't the best thing to do at all. So there's lots of sort of information out there that you can have with how you can use your money for good. And even if you just have a little bit of savings, there's great things like community energy, which you can support, which really is about helping to create this sort of resilience within our communities. And if you are a millionaire listening to us and you are interested in finding out more about Patriotic Millionaires, then do look us up on LinkedIn or on the website, and do get in touch just for chat, because we're a fantastic group of people. It's a great organisation to be a part of. And for everybody else, please do support all of these other great organisations that are working on this, like Tax Justice UK, Oxfam, and the Fair Tax Foundation. We work together with all of these organisations to address this and move forward. And I just want to stress that the things that I talk about, they're not about demonising wealth, because wealth is bloody brilliant, but you can have that fantastic life and make good choices for society and use your wealth in such a way that it's good for other people as well.
Thank you so much again, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in once more. We are on all social media. We also have a newsletter, so do sign up. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we will leave all the links in the show notes. Thank you, and see you next week.